there have been times when they've invited people that I know, friends of mine, to sit at the table and have conversations with them. And for me, going forward, I think I'm going to be more proactive about reaching out. I think they're generally open to meeting.
Zamantungwa.
There's something that's very recent in the news right now, and it's an example of a young person who's not African, taking an active role in sort of shaping the politics of his country. One of our fellow shapers was recently arrested in Venezuela, and he speaks out against what's happening in his country. I think that's one of the space which we're trying to influence what's happening. So sometimes it's not us getting directly within the leadership structures of the, of the governments that we're in, but something that Rodrigo has been doing is phenomenal. I mean, he ended up having one of the biggest youth-run NGOs that's speaking out against what's happening in this country. And right now, you're seeing on social media how other young people are saying, we need to free him. Why is it that this has happened to him? Why has he been detained? But I think over and above that, to then bring it home, you look at what's happened just here in Nigeria. It was young people who said, we need to free our girls. It was young people who say to government, why are you not speaking out against what's happened to the girls? And my understanding is it didn't start happening just now before the World Economic Forum. This is something that's been happening in Nigeria. And it's young people who say we need government to take a bigger stance. So I think our involvement in politics sometimes isn't us necessarily going within the leadership structures. I think that's important. I think we need to, get into the leadership structures and rise within the ranks. But sometimes it's also making sure that we play a part in making sure that government listens to what needs to be done. Whether it's Rodrigo in Venezuela or, it's the Abuja hub and the Lagos hub who've run an amazing campaign right here at home. I think young people aren't as far in the wheel, actually. There was a session I was in yesterday. Dr. Nkosana Moyo, former Minister of Finance in Zimbabwe, said something that a lot of the panel members disagreed with him on. And I got where he comes from because I've seen it happening in my country. Where he said, when you see young leaders sometimes getting into politics in particular, they end up becoming the leaders that have been leading them. So I was making the point about how African leaders learned corruption from their colonial masters. Young leaders are seeing how leadership is from the current leaders. We're dissatisfied about it, but you end up having an animal farm situation where when we assume those roles, we become what we know. And so I think, if anything, the challenge then to us young people who are privileged and who are sitting here is, don't become what you know. Have the vision of the Africa that you want to live in, the South Africa, the Venezuela, the Nigeria that you want to live in, and don't forget that vision. Because then it's only that way that you won't become the leader that you once detested or criticized. And I think that's actually important. Because right now it's easy for us to say, old people aren't doing enough, they're not doing enough. What's going to happen from 10 years from now? Are we going to become the leaders that we're so dissatisfied with? Because if that's what we become, then the story that we hear of Africa really will be a dismal one. The story that we're hearing about Africa rising, we won't rise to our full potential. So I think it becomes then important that we remember that this doesn't just stop here, that this continues in the work that we do. And I suppose that's why it's so important as young people that we say we don't just want other talk shops. Where do we go beyond this? Because the advocacy work that you do beyond platforms and forums like this will actually make sure that you don't forget the vision that you have for the country you want to live in and for the Africa that you want to live in. And that's crucial. That's the challenge. I mean, not just for me and not just for other people in this room, but for everybody out there. And we need to make that work for the Rodrigos of this world. We need to make it work for the over 200 girls who've been abducted and for the many other young Africans who are living in abject poverty and aren't realizing their full potential. We need to be able to tap into that, and that's crucial.
Well, thank you. Kola, what's your perspective on this?
Speaking from an entrepreneur's point of view, I think you have to be in politics, but not be political. The importance of this is, if you are not, the decision that those in power, those in government make affects everything you do. Now, if we bring that down to the youth, as this generation, it shows our strength in numbers. You see, this is the way I look at life, and this is where I think Africa's rising, that wording is going to be Africa risen in the next 5 years. If as the youth and the next generation of this continent, we realize we have numbers. And by virtue of numbers, everyone has one vote. And if you utilize that vote well in influencing the main decision, the outcome is what you want, then we'll start moving properly. Simple position, if you go back and think about it. If we say 44%, as you quoted, is that age, 16 and above. If you look at the voting ages in most of our countries, it's 16, 18. So it tells you something. We're more than them. And if you are, then let's take that power position by virtue of that vote that you have in trying to influence those in government, those in power, in trying to create a better future.
Just a moment, Kola. More practically, because I'm looking at what happened, say, for instance, in our country. We do know that over 50% of our population are young people, yet we would seem to experience this apathy. I do not know if you also witnessed it in your country as well. You just went through an election in South Africa, where young people are the ones who sit behind, they just criticize and possibly tweeting, and no one is going to the polls because the elderly women, the older women whom you see standing in the sun, queuing up to cast their vote.
You see, the energy that we take away from a forum like this, that this people, the people sitting in the audience, the people watching, the energy we want everyone to take away is this. The strength we have is in numbers. The numbers we have is in us. If we decide we want a change on our continent, in our countries, that change will come from the power we have in that vote. So you need to take your civic responsibilities serious.
How do we rouse that change? How do we begin to, I think, Bineta, you're going to come in here, because you started a movement in Senegal where the women eventually intervened in politics, you know, to bring peace to that country. How did you start that change, and how do you think young people can learn from that?
Let me just add something. I talked one day to a friend of mine, you know her, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She was candidate. She lost completely the first election in Liberia. And she wanted to come back to run again. I said, but why are you coming back? You know that, she said, no. You know, I'm doing politics because I wanted to change the life of my people. I said, so great. But she said another thing. I said, so what will you say some of us, if you are not passionate by being in politics, don't get into it. So I think it's apply on any. If you are not passionate by doing your business, that even you dream, it's you go to bed and you are happy with the whole day. You wake up, you are happy. So even in politics, you have to say, this is my objective, this is the vision I have. Somebody like her can be a mentor to tell you how you, especially the young, if you want to enter into politics, what are the things to do. Coming back to the Farm Africa Solidarity and what we have done, for example, in Senegal, you took a new citizen, a new citizenship, a new way of doing, because you may be in civil society and asking our government to be accountable to the people. That's the young people have, this to mobilize. Of course, it's not the end of the day, but you can mobilize with this. So what we did in Senegal was what I call the 3M, mobilization. We did mediation as well, and we do monitoring. During our last elections, we create something which was the Women's Situation Room. We were not part of government. We were not part of political parties. But the women who are the ones who are underground, civil society, our mothers, grandmothers, everybody come together to say, we need to stop some of the violence. Some of you have seen what was happening in Senegal in the elections. So we form a group to say, no, peace in our country. Let's go to election.